Tomahawk AH744 was one of a production order of 140 Curtiss Hawk 81 aircraft placed by the French Air Force to Curtiss aircraft manufacturers before the Battle of France. Curtiss began manufacture of these aircraft, but after France fell to the Nazi occupation, the aircraft that Curtiss were building were diverted for use by the British. Because the order had been started for the French Air Force, aspects of the aircraft were built to French specifications. This included French text on parts of the internal flying controls, and some were even supplied to the RAF with metric dials on flying instruments. Some, or maybe all, were supplied with the French specification engine throttle controls that worked the opposite way to British aircraft, in the French being pulled back to increase power. The French specified lap belts instead of RAF Sutton harnesses, and this cost one ATA pilot his life whilst ferrying an early Tomahawk in the UK. No doubt a number of other differences existed as well. The Mk1 Tomahawk was tested alongside the Hurricane by RAF test pilots, and after a thorough shakedown it was decided that the Hurricane was a much better choice of fighter aircraft. The Tomahawk was deemed not suitable for British aerial combat, since they lacked armour protection for the pilot, armoured glass windshields, or even self-sealing fuel tanks. Nevertheless, since a German invasion was feared to be imminent, they were actually issued to several operational squadrons as a supplementary aircraft. The history of the Tomahawk AH744 states it was built to British Purchasing Commission contract F273 by the Curtiss Wright Corporation at Buffalo in New York, in America. It was shipped to the UK by sea, arriving in November 1940. On the 13th of November 1940 it arrived by road at Westlands in Yeovil for assembly and testing. On the 3rd of February 1941 it was flown to Cunliffe Owen Limited at Eastleigh near Southampton to the service aircraft section, where it remained throughout 1941. There it was converted to British specifications. On the 31st of January 1942 it is recorded as having passed its repaired and awaiting allocation certification, which presumably means the aircraft was ready for RAF collection, but it remained at Eastleigh until the 8th of September 1942, when it was flown to 2-9 Maintenance Unit at High Urkel. On the 11th of October 1942 it was taken on charge by 1472 Flight at RAF Dishforth and moved to RAF Catterick with that unit on the 17th of January 1943. This Tomahawk crashed between Brough and Barnard Castle at Gill Moss on the 10th of February 1943. Primarily, Tomahawks were used only for training roles within Britain, with the majority of that training focusing on cooperation with the British Army and dive bombing drills. RAF Dishforth and RAF Catterick both cooperated closely with garrison headquarters at Stainton Army Camp near Barnard Castle, and often saw cooperation between 1472 Training Squadron's Fairey battle aircraft and Tomahawks with armoured and infantry training units at Barnard Castle. Tomahawks were, however, sent overseas. The first Desert Air Force squadron to be equipped with Tomahawks was 112 Squadron. They exchanged their Gloucester Gladiators for the P-40 fighters. 112 Squadron became famous for its shark's tooth insignia on the engine cowling, and this scheme was later adopted by the American Volunteer Group in China. The Tomahawk went on to have a second variant. The Curtiss P-40 Tomahawk Mark IIB came along with improvements to its armour. It had self-sealing fuel tanks, British radios and much heavier firepower thanks to 2.30-inch machine guns in each of its wings, in addition to the 2.50-inch guns in the fuselage. It went on to have a successful life with the RAF, especially in the desert region of Africa. It took several days in very bad weather conditions for rescue teams to reach AH744. After it was located, they only managed to remove the pilot. Most of the aircraft was left in place. Over the years, the site has been visited numerous times and various items removed. Many of these aircraft artefacts are now on display at the North East Sea, Land and Air Museum at Sunderland, and today's display is loaned to Teesdale Aviation Day by Fort Perch Rock Museum on the Wirral. We thank them for their kind gesture in allowing us to show you these items today. Flying Officer Henry Emerson Harry Wright was 29 years old and from Alstree in Derbyshire. He is buried at Catterick Cemetery in a Commonwealth war grave, which is still lovingly cared for to this day. He is also mentioned on the Alstree War Memorial in Derbyshire.